The desert keeps its secrets well. Under the relentless Egyptian sun, where sand drifts like slow-moving tides, there is a name that lingers like a half-forgotten echo: Zanakht. He is a king without a story, a ruler without a throne room in our memory, a shadow at the edge of Egypt's great golden age. The records of his existence are maddeningly scarce. A few clay seals, the faint outline of a royal cartouche, and bones, unusually long, towering over the remains of his peers, as though he had been marked out by the gods themselves. And yet, this same man may have ruled over one of the most transformative moments in human civilization, or perhaps he never truly ruled at all. Sanakht, or perhaps Nebka, drifts between identities, wearing names that shift depending on who tells the story. The ancient scribes who recorded Egypt's royal lineages offer conflicting tales. Some place him at the dawn of the Third Dynasty, the first to inherit the legacy of the unifier kings. Others insist he came later, stepping into power after the legendary Djoser, whose step pyramid still pierces the horizon like a stairway to the heavens. That uncertainty is more than a quirk of ancient paperwork. It's a mystery that forces us to question the very way we understand the chronology of one of the world's oldest civilizations. The fragments we do have paint a portrait both tantalizing and incomplete. A set of royal seals bearing his Horus name, Hor Sanakht, discovered far from the great capital of Memphis, suggest a ruler whose reach extended into the Sinai. There, in the rugged highlands of Wadi Magare, his image appears in relief, smiting enemies, claiming turquoise from mines that fed Egypt's wealth and its artisans' craft. These scenes hint at ambition, at power projected far beyond the Nile, but they are echoes in the wind, not chapters in a complete biography. And then there is the tomb, Mastaba K2 at Beit Khalaf, a massive structure of mud brick, impressive in scale but stripped of all certainty. Some believe it belonged to Zanakht himself, others argue it was built for another high official. Inside lay the skeletal remains of a man of extraordinary height, around 6 feet 3 inches, towering over the average ancient Egyptian by more than a foot. In 2017, modern analysis suggested these bones belonged to someone afflicted with gigantism, making Sanakht, if the identification holds, the oldest known case in human history. Was his unusual stature a symbol of divine favor in the eyes of his people, or did it mark him as an outsider even in his own court? The sands keep their silence. His reign, if it was truly his, is given 18 years in some king lists, yet the archaeological record refuses to confirm it. We have no grand pyramid to attribute to his name, no sprawling temple walls covered in triumphs. Perhaps he reigned in a time of transition, when Egypt's resources were being drawn into experiments that would culminate in Djoser's monumental step pyramid. Or perhaps his story is the victim of erasure, his legacy swallowed by the politics of memory that have always shaped history. What makes Sanakht so haunting is not what we know, but what we cannot know. He stands at the edge of Egypt's old kingdom like a half-drawn figure in a faded mural, both present and absent. His story is a reminder that even in civilizations as monumental as ancient Egypt, history is fragile, a fabric woven from clay, stone, and memory, all too easily frayed by time. In chasing Sanakht, we are chasing the shape of a shadow across 3,000 years, hoping that one day a new discovery might bring the phantom pharaoh fully into the light. But if the desert hides Sanakht's truth, it also teases us with contradictions. The first puzzle lies in his name itself. The Horus name, Hor Sanakht, means strong protection of Horus, a title that carries both royal authority and divine sanction. Yet in later king lists, written centuries after his supposed reign, we find a different name, Nebka, assigned to the same slot in the dynasty. Are they the same man, with one name for his lifetime and another for the record books? Or are they two separate rulers whose stories have been tangled together by the careless stitching of history? For decades, scholars have debated this identity crisis. Some point to the seal impressions found at Beit Khalaf, which bear both the Horus name and the Nebka cartouche, as evidence they were one and the same. Others argue that the evidence is circumstantial, that these seals could have been reused, or that Nebka's reign was brief and easily overshadowed. In the absence of definitive proof, Egyptology has become less a science of certainty and more an art of inference. The question of his place in the dynasty only deepens the mystery. The Greek historian Manetho, writing in the 3rd century BCE, lists Nebka, assumed by some to be Zanakht, as the founder of the 3rd dynasty. But the archaeological record tells another story. Djoser's monuments dominate the period, suggesting he came earlier or was far more influential. It is possible that Sanakht's reign, whether before or after Djoser's, was not marked by grand construction, but by consolidation, diplomacy, or military campaigns we have yet to uncover. The silence of the stones does not necessarily mean inactivity. Sometimes power is exercised in ways that leave no monuments behind. And then there are the expeditions to Sinai. Reliefs at Wadi Magare show Sanakht in the classic pose of the smiting pharaoh, wielding a mace over a kneeling foe. These images, carved into rock in a place far from the Nile, suggest a leader who valued Egypt's control over valuable resources: turquoise for jewelry and amulets, copper for tools and weapons. It is here in these barren wind-carved mountains that Sanakht's presence feels most tangible. Yet even this tangible presence is like a mirage, offering no clear indication of the scale of his ambitions or the breadth of his domain. The more we search, the more Sanakht slips away. His possible tomb yields a giant's bones, but no definitive inscription naming him. His seals link him to Nebka, but do not conclusively merge the two identities. His reign is given years in ancient lists, but those years are like sand in the wind, counted yet ungraspable. Perhaps that is the true allure of Zanakht. He is a test of our ability to reconstruct the past from fragments, to listen for a voice that may never speak again. If Sanakht's life is a ghost story, then his death is an archaeological riddle. In the dusty expanse of Beit Khalaf, far from the monumental stone pyramids of Saqqara, lies Mastaba K2, a massive mud brick structure that seems almost modest when measured against Egypt's great tombs, yet it hides secrets just as profound. Excavations in the early 20th century revealed a burial chamber deep within, and there, amid centuries of silence, the skeletal remains of a man unlike any other pharaoh. The bones told a story before the inscriptions ever could. At an estimated 6 feet 3 inches in height, the man they belonged to towered over his contemporaries. In a world where the average Egyptian man stood little more than 5.5 feet, this figure would have seemed almost superhuman. The proportions were strange: elongated limbs, thickened facial bones, signs that drew the attention of modern medical researchers. In 2017, scientists proposed an extraordinary conclusion. This was the earliest known case of gigantism in human history. If the remains do belong to Zanakht, it changes the way we see him. A towering king in an age when physical presence carried immense symbolic weight would have been a living embodiment of divine power. In the eyes of his subjects, he might have seemed chosen by the gods, his unusual stature a mark of celestial favor. And yet, gigantism is also a condition that can bring pain, weakness, and a shortened life. Was he a revered figure whose body awed those who saw him? Or was he a man who carried the burden of a body both feared and misunderstood? The problem is, we cannot be sure it was him. The mastaba lacks a definitive inscription linking the burial to Zanakht, and the practice of reusing or appropriating tombs was not unheard of in ancient Egypt. The association comes largely from the royal seals and inscriptions found nearby, enough to tempt the imagination, but not enough to close the case. It is entirely possible that the giant was a high official or a relative of the royal family, buried in a place of honor but not himself a king. And yet the image persists: a giant pharaoh striding through the courts of Memphis, his head higher than the rest, his shadow stretching across the polished limestone floors. It's an image powerful enough to survive the uncertainty, powerful enough to become a part of Sanakht's legend. In the absence of hard fact, legends have a way of writing themselves. If Zanakht truly wore the crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, the record of his rule has been scattered like desert dust. The king lists speak of 18 years, long enough for a ruler to leave a visible mark on the land, yet there is no pyramid in his name, no sprawling temple walls adorned with his victories. In an age when kings built monuments as messages to eternity, the silence is almost deafening. Yet the lack of monumental works raises another possibility: that his reign was diminished, either in reality or in memory. In the politics of ancient Egypt, history was not simply recorded, it was curated. Kings could be elevated in grandeur or quietly erased from the narrative. If Sanakht's rule fell between that of two more celebrated figures, Khasekhemwy, the last of the Second Dynasty, and Djoser, the builder of the Step Pyramid, it is not hard to imagine how the shadow of those names could eclipse his own. Perhaps he was remembered only in fragments because those who came after had little interest in preserving his legacy, and yet some part of his presence endured. His name appears in the most authoritative king lists. His seals still bear the mark of royal authority. His image still strikes in the rock of the Sinai. For a figure so shrouded in uncertainty, he has proven stubbornly resistant to complete erasure. Zanakht exists on the edge of history, too faint to see clearly, yet too distinct to disappear entirely. Perhaps his reign was a time of consolidation rather than grand construction. Egypt had just emerged from the turbulence of the Second Dynasty, a period when competing royal houses may have vied for the throne. It is possible that Sanakht's task was not to build, but to stabilize, to unite factions, restore order, and secure Egypt's far-flung resource frontiers. In this light, the reliefs at Wadi Maghare take on new weight. These carvings, high in the Sinai Peninsula, show him smiting foreign enemies, a timeless image of pharaonic power, but also a message to any who might threaten Egypt's control over precious turquoise and copper mines. Such resources were the lifeblood of royal prestige, funding both the artistry and the technology that underpinned Egypt's growing power. In the end, Sanakht remains a question mark written in stone and bone. He drifts through the Third Dynasty like a shadow crossing the desert, leaving behind only the faintest signs of his passage. A seal here, a carving there, the long bones of a man who may have been more myth than monarch. We search for him in the way one searches for a constellation in a cloudy night sky, not by what is there, but by the spaces between. It is possible that Sanakht's true story lies buried still, waiting in the silence beneath the sand, a lost archive sealed in a forgotten chamber, a fragment of inscription tucked into an unexcavated wall, a single clear name to anchor him firmly in time. Until that discovery, his life will remain a mosaic of guesses. The strong protector of Horus, the phantom Nebka, the giant king who may have strode the halls of Memphis or may never have ruled at all. And perhaps that is what makes him so compelling. The great pharaohs, with their towering pyramids and endless inscriptions, can be understood, measured, explained. But Sanakht exists in the liminal space between fact and legend, where imagination must do the work of history. His story belongs as much to the archaeologist sifting sand as to the dreamer staring across the desert, wondering who once walked there. In the shimmering heat of the Egyptian sun, the desert keeps its counsel. The dunes shift, the wind whispers, and somewhere beneath it all, the truth of Sanakht lies sleeping. We may never wake it fully, but the chase, the search, the slow unearthing of a life half lost to time is its own kind of treasure. For in chasing the phantom pharaoh, we are reminded that history is not a list of names and dates carved in stone, but a living mystery, and some mysteries are worth keeping.